All right, welcome to another deep dive. You ready to jump into some seriously useful stuff today? We're talking real-life English conversations. You know, those everyday situations that can sometimes make you feel a little tongue-tied.
Absolutely. And we've got a great resource for this. It's full of dialogues for all sorts of everyday situations, like a cheat sheet for life.
Exactly. I love that. So think of this deep dive as your guide to navigating those tricky conversations.
Yeah.
First up, let's head to the grocery store. I'm sure we've all been there. You're looking for something, can't find it anywhere. What do you do?
Well, the first thing is don't panic. It happens to everyone. The key is to ask for help and to do it clearly and politely.
Makes sense. So how do we do that? What's the best way to ask?
Our source material suggests a simple phrase to start. Excuse me, can you help me find? For example, you could say, excuse me, can you help me find the baking powder?
Short, sweet, to the point. I like it. But what if they point me in some vague direction and I still can't find it? Should I just, wander around aimlessly?
No, not at all. Just ask for more specific directions. You could say, I'm sorry, I still can't find it. Could you show me where it is?
I guess a confused look probably helps too, right?
Absolutely. A little body language can go a long way in those situations. Okay, so you found your baking powder, but then you remember you need almond milk too. What do you say?
Would something like, and do you have almond milk work?
Perfect.
Yeah.
You've already got their attention, so just add on to your request. See? You're getting the hang of this already. Now let's move on to another common scenario. The coffee shop.
Okay, the coffee shop. Got to get that caffeine fix. But sometimes ordering in English can be a bit intimidating, you know?
I get it. It can feel a bit overwhelming with all the choices, but the key is to break it down into manageable phrases. Like start with, I'd like to state your order. For example, I'd like a medium cappuccino, please.
I'd like a medium cappuccino, please. Got it. And if I want to add something else to my order, how do I do that?
You can use the phrase, can I also get? So to complete your order, you'd say, can I also get a blueberry muffin?
Okay, so I'd like for the main order, and then can I also get for anything extra? This is making me feel more confident already. What about when the barista tells me the total? Sometimes I have trouble understanding numbers in English.
That's a common problem. Don't hesitate to ask them to repeat or clarify. You can say, I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please? Or could you say that a little slower?
Great advice. I'm ready to conquer the coffee shop now. But what about when I'm in a new city and I get completely lost?
Ah, the lost tourist situation.
Hmm.
That's where those direction asking skills really come in handy. Remember, be clear, be polite, and use landmarks as reference points.
Okay, but how do I even start? What's the best way to ask for directions without sounding totally clueless?
Our source suggests using the phrase, could you tell me how to get to? For instance, could you tell me how to get to the nearest train station?
And what if they talk too fast or use words I don't understand? It happens sometimes.
Don't worry, that's normal. Just politely ask them to slow down or repeat. You can say, I'm sorry, could you please speak a little slower? Or could you repeat that, please?
What about asking about landmarks along the way? Like, is there a big park near the train station?
Exactly. Landmarks can be super helpful for remembering directions. And here's a tip from the source material. Practice with Google Maps. Pick a random destination, pretend you're lost, and practice asking for directions out loud. It's actually kind of fun.
Okay, that's actually a really good idea. I'm seeing how I can turn everyday situations into English practice. Now, onto something that always makes me a bit nervous. Doctor's appointments.
It's understandable to feel a bit anxious, especially when you're trying to explain your symptoms in another language. But remember, clear communication is key to getting the care you need.
Right, so how do I even start? Do I just launch into all my symptoms as soon as I walk in?
Well, first things first, you'll probably need to confirm your appointment. You can say, hello, I have an appointment with doctor's name.
Okay, and once I'm in the exam room, what's the best way to explain what's wrong?
Our source recommends using the phrase, what seems to be the problem, to prompt the patient to describe their symptoms. You can then use simple language to explain how you're feeling. For example, I have a headache, or I've been feeling nauseous.
But what if I don't know the English word for a specific symptom? Should I just try to describe it?
It's helpful to look up any medical terms beforehand if you can, but if you can't remember the exact word, try describing it as best you can. You can also use gestures or point to the area where you're feeling discomfort.
So, I could say, I have a pain here, and point to my stomach.
Exactly. Doctors are used to working with patients from diverse backgrounds, so they'll understand and work with you.
That's good to know. Is it okay to write down my symptoms and questions beforehand? Sometimes I get nervous and forget things.
That's an excellent strategy. Writing things down can help you feel more prepared and make sure you cover everything you want to discuss.
This is really helpful. It's already taking a lot of the anxiety out of the situation.
Good. Remember, preparation and clear communication are your best friends when it comes to doctor's appointments. And don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something.
All right, we've tackled the grocery store, ordered our coffee, found our way around a new city, and even survived the doctor's office. Feeling pretty accomplished.
You should. We've covered a lot of ground already. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's tackle one more common scenario. Meeting new people.
Oh, that's a tough one. Even in my native language, I sometimes struggle with that. Where do we even begin?
It usually starts with a simple greeting and introduction. Our source suggests using phrases like, "Hi, it's nice to meet you," or "Hello, my name is."
Okay, that's easy enough.
Yeah.
But then what? After the initial hello, what do I say next? I never know how to keep the conversation going.
The easiest way to keep a conversation flowing is to ask questions. Simple things like, "What do you do?" or "Where are you from?" can get the ball rolling and help you learn more about the person.
But what if I don't understand their answer? Accents and slang words can be tricky sometimes.
That's perfectly normal. Just politely ask for clarification. You can say, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" or "I didn't quite catch that."
And what about body language? Smiling, eye contact, all that stuff. Is that important too?
Absolutely. Nonverbal cues are super important in communication. Smiling and making eye contact shows that you're engaged and interested in the conversation.
I'm starting to get the hang of this. But meeting new people can still feel a little awkward sometimes. Any tips for practicing?
Our source recommends practicing introductions with a friend or family member. You can also try recording yourself speaking English to get used to hearing your own voice.
Those are great ideas. I'm feeling much more ready to face the world, armed with these conversation starters.
That's what we like to hear. Remember, the more you practice, the more confident you'll become. Welcome back to our deep dive on real-life English conversations. Remember all those essential phrases we talked about in part 1? Well, now it's time to take those phrases to the next level.
Yeah, it's like we've got all these tools in our conversational toolbox. Now we need to learn how to use them like a pro.
Exactly. It's all about adapting those basic phrases to different situations. So let's go back to the grocery store for a minute. Remember that phrase, "Excuse me, can you help me find..." That's a great starting point. But let's say you're looking for something more specific, like gluten-free pasta.
Okay, so instead of just saying, "Can you help me find pasta?" I'd say, "Can you help me find the gluten-free pasta?"
Perfect. You're adding that specific detail, gluten-free, to make the phrase work for you.
I never thought about it that way. It's like I'm filling in the blanks.
Exactly. And this same principle applies to all the other scenarios we've talked about. Like the coffee shop, for example. You've got your, "I'd like a medium cappuccino." But what if you want something a bit more adventurous? Like a latte with oat milk and sugar-free vanilla syrup.
Okay, let's see. I'd start with, "I'd like a latte, please." And then to add those extras, I could say, "Can I get that with oat milk and sugar-free vanilla syrup?"
You got it. You've taken that basic phrase and made it your own.
This is fun. But what if I can't remember the word for oat milk? It happens.
No worries. If you forget a word, just try describing it. You could say something like, "Can I get that with the milk made from oats?"
Good point. So it's really about finding ways to communicate, even if you don't have all the vocabulary.
Right. Now, let's go back to being a lost tourist for a minute. Remember those phrases for asking for directions. Could you tell me how to get to them? But what happens when you only understand half of the directions?
Oh man, that's my worst nightmare. I get so flustered.
Don't panic. Remember, most people are happy to help. Just ask them to repeat or clarify. You can say, "I'm sorry, my English isn't very good. Could you please repeat that slowly?" Or you could even ask them to write it down.
Oh, asking them to write it down. That's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?
And remember, landmarks are your friends. Don't be afraid to use them to your advantage. Instead of just asking for the train station, maybe ask, "Is there a big park near the train station? Can you tell me how to get to the park?" That gives you a visual reference point.
These tips are so helpful. Okay, let's switch gears back to the doctor's office. We talked about explaining symptoms, but what if the doctor uses a medical term I don't understand? Do I just nod and pretend like I know what they're saying?
Definitely not. It's totally okay to ask for clarification. You could say, "I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term. Could you explain what it means?" Or, "Could you describe that in simpler terms? Your health is important, so make sure you understand everything."
That makes me feel so much better. I always felt like I had to pretend I knew everything.
And what about those times when you just can't find the right words to describe how you're feeling? It
Oh,
happens.
all the time.
We'll try using descriptive language and analogies. For example, if you have a sharp pain, you could say, it feels like a stabbing sensation. Or if it's a dull ache, you could say, it feels like a constant pressure. Get creative with your language.
That's great advice. I'm definitely going to try that. Now, let's go back to meeting new people. We talked about those basic introductions, but how do you go beyond that initial hello, keep the conversation flowing?
It's all about showing genuine interest in the other person. Ask follow-up questions based on what they've told you. If someone says they work in marketing, you could ask, what kind of marketing do you do? Or if they mention they're from a different city, you could ask, what's it like living there? Simple things like that can keep the conversation going.
I get it, but what if I'm just feeling really nervous and can't think of anything to say?
It's helpful to have a few go-to topics in mind, things you enjoy talking about, hobbies, interests, current events.
That's a good point. I could talk about my love for hobby all day.
There you go. And remember, it's okay to have those moments of silence in a conversation. You don't have to fill every second with words.
This is all so helpful. It's like I'm finally getting the hang of these conversational strategies.
That's great. Remember, it's all about practice, practice, practice. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how you learn.
So we've covered a lot in part 2. We've customized our coffee orders, navigated tricky doctor visits, and even brushed up on our small talk skills. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering if our source material has any other tips for practicing these real-life conversations.
Well, one of the best things you can do is immerse yourself in the language as much as possible.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into real-life English conversations. We've covered so much ground already, from grocery shopping to coffee orders to even doctor visits.
It's like we've built this amazing conversational toolkit, right?
Exactly. But there's one key ingredient we haven't fully explored yet, something that can make all the difference. Confidence.
Absolutely. Confidence is what really helps you connect with people, express yourself clearly, and just feel comfortable speaking English.
But confidence, that's a tricky one. Is it something you're born with? Or can you, learn to be more confident?
Well, the good news is confidence is a skill you can develop. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, I like that analogy. So how do we work that confidence muscle? Give me the workout routine.
Well, one powerful technique is something called positive self-talk. It's basically about changing those negative thoughts, the ones that say, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, and replacing them with positive affirmations.
So instead of focusing on what I'm afraid of, I should focus on what I can do.
Exactly. Tell yourself things like, I am learning and improving every day. I can handle this conversation, or I'm proud of myself for trying. It might sound silly, but those positive affirmations, they really work.
It's like giving yourself a pep talk before a big game.
Exactly. Now, another important thing is to embrace those inevitable mistakes. Don't be afraid of them. See them as opportunities to learn.
It's like, don't get discouraged if I mess up. Just learn from it and move on.
Right. Mistakes are proof that you're putting yourself out there, that you're trying. And remember, even native speakers make mistakes sometimes.
That's true. I think sometimes I get so focused on being perfect that I forget it's okay to make mistakes.
And another great way to boost your confidence is to find a supportive community. Connect with other English learners, find a language partner, join a conversation group, things like that.
So basically, surround myself with people who understand the challenges and can encourage me along the way.
Exactly. It's always easier when you have a supportive community, people who are going through the same thing. And remember, this journey to fluency, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Be patient with yourself.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have so many new tools and strategies to use now.
That's great to hear. And remember, the key is to take action, put these tips into practice, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep those conversations flowing.